This week on the Ocean Cruisers podcast, I'm having a chat with Super Yacht Captain Glenn Shephard. Most people know Glenn as a TV personality and a captain of the 54-metre sailing yacht Parisal 3. However, Glenn is also full-time liveaboard on his own cruising boat, Avalon, a Jeanneau 42DS, which at the moment he is using to cruise around the Mediterranean. If you want to come sailing with Glenn this year in the BVI's week starting the 9th of December, Glenn will be a skipper at the Odyssey Sailing Festival. Visit theoceancruisers.com/Odyssey for cabin tickets. If you want to follow along with our journey aboard Voyager, check out our YouTube channel. We've been putting a bunch of videos up of the refit work that we've started doing, getting the boat ready to circumnavigate. But for now, enjoy this chat with Glenn Shephard. For anybody who knows Glenn, I suppose from being a super yacht captain, probably watched him on television, seen him on the internet. Maybe not that many people actually know that you are a full-time cruiser. When you're not on a ginormous boat, you're on a boat which is more our size, which is pretty cool.
People think I'm crazy, but a lot of people I know who work on boats, it's the last thing they want to do on their time off. But for me, it's, I love it.
Yeah, just go back and work on your own boat and deal with those problems.
Yeah. I try not to work too much. I try to enjoy it, but I do have a lot of projects going at any one time, and I try to get a few of them banged out. But for me, it's all about enjoying the boat.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so I'll tell you what, just start off, like what boats have you got? And just because you explained a cool story to me about what actually happened that boat. So it was in a bit of a disaster, and then you're like,
yes,
rejigged to the disaster, and it worked out to be a pretty decent situation.
So it's a Jeanneau 42DS. I had a Jeanneau 34 Sun Liberty, 1992.
Oh,
I bought it from a charter company. It had done a couple seasons before. I was living in Tokyo at the time, and I wasn't able to use it that much, but I knew I wanted to buy my own boat. And so I bought it from these guys with the idea. It was a little bit more than my budget, but I bought it from this French company. It was called Petit Breton. It was one of the biggest dealers of Jeanneau boats in the world, or in France anyway. And I bought it. I found the boat. It was a little more money than I wanted to spend, but I said, hey, listen, if I buy the boat, can I leave it in charter with you? And we just keep chartering it, and then I'll come and use it when I can. And that's kind of how I started on the first boat. I bought that one in Brittany, and I kept it there. I think one season I used it there for one season. Then I trucked it down to the Med near Hyères, if you know Toulon, Hyères area.
Yeah.
And so she was there for a little while, and I planned on having that boat my whole life, but after having it for a while, I had all these upgrades in my mind that I was going to do. And I went to the London Boat Show. I think it was at Earl's Court. I can't remember if it was still there or somewhere else. But I thought, you always go to boat. I love boat shows. And I was at the boat show, and I thought, go look around and see what the new boats in my size range are like. And I saw them. I wasn't that impressed, This was in 2008, I think.
Okay.
Maybe Christmas or New Year's 2008. I think they had the show in January. And I went to have a look at the 35-footer from Jeanneau and a whole bunch of others. And while I was there, I had a look at this 42 DS. And I went in and I saw the aft cabin, which is a full beam aft cabin.
Yeah,
and I fell in love with this boat. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I don't need this boat. It's a lot of money, but it's really cool. And then I started weighing up the differences of doing all the upgrades to my older boat, which was already in 2008. It's a 1990. So how old was that? 18 years old. By the time I retired, we're talking a 30-year-old boat. Whereas if I buy a newer one, I get all the bells and whistles, and that was the thought process. And I was working, I was making a pretty good wage at the time. So I thought, what the hell? I ended up buying this boat. I had no plan to buy this boat, ended up buying it. And then
did you get it from the boat show?
No, I actually, what I usually, even with my first boat, I saw my first boat in the boat show. I was there. I met my dad in Paris. I was living in Tokyo, flew into Paris to the Paris boat show. And we went around the show, and I said, listen, there's this one little boat. It seems really crazy, but I want to go have a look on board, see what it's like. Had some modern features on it, but it was a 2-cabin, 2-head boat with a nice saloon on a 34-footer. So it was pretty revolutionary.
Two cabin, two head.
Two cabins, two ensuite heads. And, nice galley, nice U-shaped settee, it was nice saloon. Everything was pretty cool about it. And it was some kind of crazy new modern ideas. But, it was a brand new boat. So you're paying big bucks, right? And I grabbed the brochure. I had, a stack of brochures like this, and went back to Tokyo, and I'm just flipping through them. And every time I kept going back to that one brochure, and I thought, I wonder if I could get a used one. And so that's when I started looking online, or no, it was before online. I was looking in magazines, in advertisements in the back of magazines. This was in 1992. So a little bit before the World Wide Web. And I found this one dealer in France, Petit Breton. They had a couple that they were chartering, but they wanted to put the money into newer boats. So they were selling two of them. So I flew there with my dad, had a look, ended up buying the boat. And I left it with them in charter, which was cool. I made some charter income back for it. And I had it for a little while. And then, like I said, I saw this 42, fell in love. And I actually had both of them for a little while. I was
going to say, how long were you cruising the 34 before you ended up upgrading to the 42?
I bought it in 92. And, I lived in Tokyo for another couple of years. I was making pretty good money in Tokyo, so I could afford. I would fly over to France use it for like a month.
Nice.
I sold her in, I think 2010. I had two boats for a while because I bought the 42. I saw it. What happened was I looked online. I found one while I was still in the States, playing around with the 34. And this guy had one, and it was used, I think in 2006. And before I could get back to go look at it, it sold. But the dealer said,
okay.
Yeah. So the dealer said, listen, I have a brand new one I can get you a really good deal on. And what I think happened was somebody bought it and then never finished the contract. So they didn't actually take possession of the boat. So they probably put like a 20 grand deposit or something like that. So I ended up getting the 42 for about $25,000 off retail, which was a really good deal.
Cool.
Yeah, it was sitting in a showroom in Germany. I went up there, had a look, and immediately fell in love. It was brand new, perfect, didn't have the mast up, obviously it was inside. And I bought it and left it with the Germans for another year, I think, inside their shed. And then we moved it to Port Lucat, French-Spanish border. And I left it out of the water there for another year. I don't think I launched it until 2010, late 2010. So I had it for 2 years, never used it. I still had the 34, which was in the States. I think it was in Miami or near Miami at the time, or near Lake Okeechobee, out of the water. So I took some time off from work. I was working on Mirabella 5, I think at the time, which is the biggest sloop in the world, 90-meter rig, 75-meter boat, 78-meter boat. Took some time off and went there and went cruising. I took it back out to the Bahamas, which I really loved, and did some more of the Abacos, the Exumas, back into Miami, and then all the way up the Intercoastal. And
nice.
Yeah, all the way up to Boston, just south of Boston. And then I got the call to come and work on Parisal. So I put her out of the water, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to sell this boat. I want to keep it. I want to keep it as my Bahamas boat. But I thought, it's a bit crazy having two boats, and it was already hard finding time to use one. So I said, okay, I'll put it up for sale, but I'll put the price up high. And if I don't sell it, I'll keep it as my. I'm not going to take
try not to sell it.
Take a haircut on it. But if I don't sell it, I'll go back and do Bahamas again. And that was always the idea. And then some three crazy Frenchmen came along and made an offer on the boat, what I was asking, and they bought it and they sailed it across the Atlantic in July. And I was talking to them. I said, hey, I've done a few Atlantic crossings. And I said, I wouldn't go out there on the boat that I work on in July. It's not the high risk hurricane time, but it is potential, And I was like, no, I wouldn't do it, but they ended up doing it. And then I found out, I followed these guys and kept up their little website. One guy bought the other two out, and the guy who kept the little boat, the 34, ended up taking it around Cape Horn. That little boat that I owned, he took it around. He sailed it around Cape. So he bought it from Florida back to France. They kept it there for a while. He crossed the Atlantic again, and went across Cape Horn. It's like,
so they did some real sailing in that boat.
you know, back then it was a 1990 Jeanneau, and they're built solid back then, you know.
Yeah, true.
And then that's when I started. I bought the 42. I started using it here and there, not a lot, because I was busy working on Parsifal. And then, like you mentioned earlier, I guess it's almost 3 years ago, beginning of COVID, whenever that was. There was a massive storm in January. I struggled with Parsifal in that storm. We were in a marina, and we were in jeopardy, tied up in a marina in that storm. And my boat was on a mooring.
This was the storm, which was like Italy and a little bit of France.
This was the one that was all of Spain. So it was, I think it was out of the east or northeast, which was kind of unusual. And it was, we saw where we were near Barcelona, we saw solid 60s for 2 days, a 60 knot breeze for 2 days, and gusting more than that.
It was the start of COVID that summer.
Just before COVID kicked off. It was January 2020, January 21st and 22nd was the storm. It was called Gloria. And
yes, I remember it. Okay.
Yeah, they said it was the highest waves ever recorded in the Med. There's 8.5 meter waves. Yeah. It historically, there would never seen.
Well, that's like entering the Med, 8.5 meter waves.
No, that was in the Med, blowing, I think, from the northeast straight towards Barcelona, blowing past, Menorca and Majorca, and a lot of places in Barcelona suffered severe damage. Majorca also, not just boats, buildings. It was a massive storm. If you Google it, you'll see a lot of videos. But where I was in Poyensa, there were 30 boats on the beach. And my boat ended up on the beach also. The mooring let go. I wasn't there. I had a buddy there looking after it. His boat ended up 10 meters away on the beach from mine. Similar situation. Both of them, I think his was maybe on his starboard side. Mine was on my port side. And unfortunately, where it was on the beach, there were a few kind of decent sized rocks, and mine came to rest on the rocks and bounced on the rocks. So it penetrated the hull in three locations on the down the port. One kind of big one like this, and then two smaller ones. But it dislodged a bulkhead and it filled the boat with water on the port side. So the water was above the chart table on the port side, if you can imagine. And, I'm watching that, and COVID's going off, and I'm wondering with everything that's going on, am I going to get the insurance money? And in the end, my company took really good care of me. They paid me out, and I ended up buying the wreck off of them for quite low, and decided to. My first thought when I saw the damage was, well, it'll never sail again, but maybe I can. And it was full of water, but maybe I can patch up the hull, cut the keel off, get rid of the rig. The rig was still intact and perfect, and turn it into a canal boat for the French canals.
I was going to say,
a canal boat, you don't really need structural integrity, because if your boat sinks, it's a 2 meter swim to the bank, and you just climb up the bank and wave the taxi down and go wherever you're going to go. So, but you're always close to shore. And that was the idea. And then when I started fixing it up to be a canal boat, my surveyor was like, this boat can sail again. She's got serious damage, but it's localized. And if you get somebody good to do the work. And I was lucky. My buddy had found a fiberglass guy, to fix up his boat. And so I asked the guy, hey, can you do mine? And he quoted me a very reasonable price. It was like 20 grand to do all the fiberglass, including removing the furniture and putting it back in. Where I had a quote from somebody used to working with super yachts, with super yacht prices, and they wanted 60 just for the fiberglass work. And that based on those, makes sense. The boat was worth like 130. So based on that, those kind of prices, and there are a lot of scratches and nicks and dings and stuff, especially during the rescue, because it took them a while took them 10 days to get the boat off the beach. I mean, they had other boats to contend with also, but the divers.
How did they get it off the beach? Did they just drag it back into the water and tow it real quick? Because
I think that's what on some of the boats they did. On mine, the insurance company had some divers lined up, or salvage company lined up to do it, but they wanted like 35 grand to get it off the beach, and they were like, that's too much. And my insurance company ended up contacting some divers that I knew, that I had them dive on Parisal. So they were from Palma area. And so I ended up talking to them, and I said, listen, I might fix this boat up. So they took pretty good care of it, but they ended up taking the rudder out. They took the keel off while she was on her side, which is bizarre because it came off quite easily. Sometimes it come off easily. But they unbolted the keel from inside and took it off. And then they just lifted it. She turned upright. They patched the 3 holes with aluminum and underwater Sika, basically.
Yeah.
And, pumped all the water out. And then they just towed it in, lifted the rig out, put the rig down on the deck with a big crane. There was no space in the marina, hard standing. So they just picked it up on a big crane and took it to a marina about a mile and a half up the road inland. And she sat there for, until I could get to it and start working on it. I had a guy come in and change every wire on the boat, obviously. Luckily, being she was on the port side, the engine wasn't submerged at all. Got a little bit of splash. Okay. There was some issues there. But the whole starboard side was perfect. The galley was perfect, everything. And the cushions and the woodwork, there's a little bit of water damage to some of the woodwork, but it's hardly noticeable. There's a lot of scratches and nicks and dings when floorboards were floating around, and during the rescue, people were throwing stuff just to get it out of the way because they weren't sure if the boat would ever sail again. So, but I'm sailing on her now in Greece, and she's fine. Like the little cosmetic damage, actually for me it's a blessing. Because when I drop a hammer on the boat, I don't give a shit. I don't care anymore because I got all these things already. So when it happened, she was show condition inside because I hardly used the boat. That storm was whatever. She was already 10 years old, 11 years old when she was in that storm. But the interior was perfect. I mean, because I hardly ever used the boat. So anyway, that's the story of Avalon.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story.
Long story long.
Long story long. Yeah. No, I've been a massive fan of your boat for a long time, because when I first started thinking about the idea of like cruising around the world with a family, I think it was probably about 2013, something like that. Right. And that was the boat that we were looking at, and we were just like, okay, if we're going to look for like a mid 40-foot boat, that is perfect. Like there's so much space inside, sail relatively well, like for a production boat, you know what I mean? It's not like an oyster or Halberd Grassy or something. No, so I just thought it was the best option on the market. The
42 DS,
the newer one,
because your boat is the one that started it all. The 54 DS was the first DS. Not the first DS. There was a 43 and a 40.
Yeah.
And a 40, which were more proper deck saloons. But the 54 was the first one with the cat eye windows and the concept of that style, or that, I don't know what you want to call it, that model or that model group really took off after the 54. They did a 50, they did a 49, they did a 45, 42, and even a 39, which is a really nice boat. But the reason I fell in love with mine was that big aft cabin. It's one big aft cabin, and I was debating buying a boat or an apartment, and I thought this boat with that big aft cabin kind of
it's better than an apartment,
like a movable apartment, and that's why I made the decision to buy it. But I think it's a great boat. I like 2 cabin boats because when I go cruising, I don't really have a lot of people around me. I have me and my partner, and then occasionally I have another couple or some friends, or my nephews or something come and visit for a little while. And so I don't like having 3 cabins because I feel the other cabin is kind of a waste. I mean, obviously you can always use it for storage, because it's
most of them turn into storage. That's the point.
I wanted a really nice cabin for myself, and that's why I went with the 42.
It doesn't feel like you're making any sacrifices in terms of living in a small space when you actually go on that boat in the aft cabin. Like I've been in a couple of them, and they're much better because the cockpits are so much higher than some of the earlier ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it just feel like you're in a super yacht a little bit, one of the smaller cabins on a super yacht.
Exactly. Well, I always say, because people make, especially on the show, they talk about, how do you live and how do you share a cabin? But on my boat, I have almost more space than where I do for work. You know what I mean?
Than when you're on the super yacht, yeah.
So it's almost, I don't have AC and everything else. I don't have someone cooking my meals and laundering my clothes for me, but it's nice. I love it. If I could, I'd cruise year round on my boat. I love spending time on my boat. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know any other super yacht captains that also like cruise full time and live on sailboats when they're
I know
not
some
chartering?
that have boats, or there's quite a few obviously have boats. A buddy of mine that, he's on rotation on another similar boat. He had one for a while, but I think he recently sold it. The captain that I took over from years ago on Parisal, one of the reasons he wanted to start rotation was he was building I think it was a 45 catamaran in Thailand or something. So I know a lot of people, one of the second engineers that I worked with early on Parisal, he bought a 36. He bought it with one of the big charter companies. So he had that, he had X number of weeks per year he could use, but he had income from it also. So
yeah.
But yeah, quite a few captains have boats of their own.
I'm not a super yacht captain. I don't work in your world, obviously, but I would assume that these super yacht captains that work on sailboats are probably a bit more enthusiastic about actually living on a boat in their own time than the people who cruise on motorboat super yachts. Is that a fair assessment?
I think, some people cruise on motor yachts. Trawlers are like people who are tired of playing with sails will maybe convert over to trawlers. So they're still getting reasonable mileage for their fuel. But not many people, people enjoy motor yachts, but often they have crew or they have a captain, and you don't really see them going long distances. In the last 2 years, I've done Majorca, Menorca, all through Italy, Greece, and all across Greece. We're almost in Turkey now. You don't see that often on a motor yacht. Definitely not something that's a gas guzzler. Those are more weekend boats, and maybe they'll go for a couple of weeks on a trip near home. But if you want to go long distance and live aboard, it makes sense to be on a sailboat, because sometimes you can get there for free when the winds are right. Sometimes
spend a lot of money on boat parts. You can.
What's that?
If you spend a lot of money on boat parts, you can sometimes get somewhere for free on a sailboat.
Yeah, exactly. I think the captains who work on sailboats are more inclined to have their own boat, because I don't know. I think when you're working on a sailboat, you're a little bit closer to the sea than you are on a motor yacht. It's more. Yeah. I'm not detracting or saying anything against motor yacht captains, although there is that kind of, we call it being on the dark side or going on the dark side, especially when guys go from sailing yachts to motor yachts. But I don't know. There's something special. As you know, you're a sailor. There's something special about a sailboat, and then if you go a super yacht sailboat, there's something really, really special there. So, and I think the mentality is different between the groups. Between people who, there's a lot of great sailors. I guess you call them sailors who work on motor yachts, but they don't know the difference between a sheet and a halyard. That's usually what I ask people when I'm thinking of hiring someone or assessing their ability to work on a big sailboat. That's a question. And if I ask them what's the difference between a sheet and a halyard, and they're like, their eyes glaze over, that they're probably a great deckhand, bosun, first mate on a motor yacht. When they come on our boats, they have no idea how all that stuff works. You know what I mean? And that's not exactly what we want. We want somebody who has an idea how that works. And that's kind of the difference, I think, between us and them. We're both, a sailing super yacht is just a normal super yacht. And it has this added extra thing of having the sails, and you can go out and sail. But in many ways, we do the same stuff, maneuvering, docking, it's all the same. A lot of the stuff, water toys, the way, the cabins, the interior stuff, it's all the same. There's a lot of similarities. But that whole other side where we go out for fun. Motor yachts never pick up anchor, go out for a couple hours motoring around and come back to the same anchorage. Whereas we do that on sailboats because the sailing part is fun. It's part of the adventure, it's part of the experience, activity, part of the experience. Whereas motor yacht, you just really just want to get to the next place. And you can never turn off the engines while you're underway, which we can. And that's really nice. That's kind of the highlight of a charter on, whether it's a small boat or a big boat, when you can, you've got the right conditions, you've got the right breeze, and you can turn off the engine and just sail. There's something special about that.
It's amazing. The moment you turn the engine off and there's just no noise, you can just like hear the prop spinning a little bit, and it's just cool. But you put a post on Instagram the other day of you bringing Parisal into a marina, and it was like a reverse beam type of parking you were doing with it. I was just like, I just cannot imagine like how nerve-wracking it must be to like perform some of those maneuvers in a boat of that size.
I've been in that port many times. It's one of the most incredible ports in the world, I think. It's Bonifacio in southern Corsica, right down at the bottom.
Okay.
And it's quite narrow, a lot of little boats all around you on both sides. You've got boats like Avalon, 40-foot boats, tons of them, 3-4 meters off each side. So it's an unusual docking situation. Because there's really only 2 spots. If you saw that video that I posted, you see there's a motor yacht on the port side, and that's usually the scenario. So it's usually either 2, sometimes 3 motor yachts in at the end. That's all they have space for, because of the day tripper boats are in there, and that's the only big spot that they have. You have to spin around just as you come in front of the ferry port, because it's wide enough to spin around, and then you back all the way in. It's fun though. It's a challenge.
It's fun. Yeah, it looks like a
I've
challenge.
been in there when it's been difficult. I've gone in there stern to wushout the bow thruster. I had a problem with actually had the bow thruster stuck down.
You've done that maneuver without a bow thruster?
I used to routinely, knock on wood, my bow thrusters have been working really well lately, but there were times when the bow thruster wouldn't work. The guests really wanted to go. We had been anchored by Lavezzi, which is a beautiful island in the Straits of Bonifacio, just outside. And, we had this great plan to go on the dock in Bonifacio. Everybody wants to do it because it's such a unique situation where you have the castle and the old town up on the hill. You're coming through a fjord, basically. And so the conditions weren't too bad. So I used my tender as a bow thruster. But the person in the tender, it's an engine, it's 150 horsepower.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
It works. But when you change your mind and want to go the other way, they got to move the boat around.
It's complicated.
So you really have to rely on your team to do that maneuver without thrusters. It's not an easy thing. But in calm conditions or light breeze, it's doable. I would give them a little lecture beforehand. Is like, because I'm talking to the mate on the foredeck. The mate's talking to them in the tender. And I'm like, if the mate asks you to push, or I ask you to push, use your own eyes. If you see that I haven't asked you to stop pushing, and you see you're pushing us into an area you can figure out we don't want to go, we don't want to smash that little 42-footer, you can stop on your own and wait for more instructions, because the timing is critical. You're doing 5 things at the same time, and you may not have time to say, hey, stop that because you're pushing us too far now. So stuff like that. But I love a challenge like that, because that's how you learn to, anyone can draw. I can have anybody off the street come in, and when it's flat calm, and back that boat into a decent size berth. But it's when the winds are contrary, or you have a problem with the thruster or this or that, you catch a line. You need that experience to be able to do it with confidence. And you never know when you're going to have to do it, because guests want to go these places,
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I could imagine doing it in a 40-footer, but not something of that size.
I don't have
actually watching it.
I have a bow thruster on my 42-footer, but it's in a locker. I haven't installed it yet. So I just bought it last winter, and I'm too busy moving the boat to install it. But I'm going to install it probably over this winter, and then I'll have I'm guessing on your 54, you must have a bow thruster.
Yeah, I've just got mine refurbished, actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, because the bigger you get, obviously, it becomes much more important. On the boat, like we're lucky on Parisal, because we've got a bow thruster and a stern thruster because she's single screw. There's no, you can't split the throttles at all. It's just, so she's relatively easy to drive in that one, up into a situation where the bow thrusters get overpowered by the wind, which is probably around 18 to 20 knots on the beam. She'll probably hold herself in 18 and start to drift.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, in 2021, she'll start to drift. You know, you can use momentum also. If there's a little bit of a lull, bang, you push yourself over, and then you got to do something quick before the wind comes back, stuff like that. But she's pretty good to maneuver.
I tell you, I've got one more question on the difference between like life on the super yacht and then life as a cruiser, and then I just want to ask you a couple of questions about actually managing the super yacht. I tell you, it will be quite interesting to talk through, because obviously, like, a lot of people that know you will know you through the show and the size and like the opulence of the boat that you spend a lot of time on. I cannot imagine there's anybody in like such a line of work when it comes to show business who lives such a drastically different lifestyle that they do when they're actually on the show. Because you go from like this ginormous palace to, you know, something like the same size that I spend my time in, which is a very different life. So it's not a sacrifice because you're used to it, and that's what you've done. But I suppose it'd be interesting just to talk to people who might be listening who don't know much about cruising boats. Like, you have a toilet that you have to like pump yourself. You have like a little fridge that you need to watch about for the electricity for, and all this type of stuff. Yep.
No, it's you know, I think the reason guests want to come on a boat like Parisal is the same kind of thinking. To be on a boat is something fun about it, and to go from place to place on a boat and to go sailing on a boat. So it's the same kind of passion for that kind of lifestyle. But, you know, obviously I'm a man of, you know, modest means. And so I don't have a 30-meter boat. I've got a 12, 13-meter boat. But it's fine because, like I said earlier, the cabin on my boat is actually, it's a bigger bunk than the one that I work on, you know?
Yeah.
It's not quite as big as the master cabin on Parisal, but and the cabin is, you know, my boat would fit in the master cabin of Parisal. But yeah, I think one of the keys to, I don't want to say success, or I want to say to a successful, happy life is being realistic about what you really need. Because at the end of the day, we need a warm, comfortable bed. We need somewhere to sit and have a meal. We need some entertainment, something interesting to see or do. You don't really need that much. And that's what I like about the lifestyle of living on a little boat. I'm not to the point where I get sick of it. I mean, obviously there's some times when, you know, if the wind's blowing too hard and the lines are creaking and you have trouble sleeping and stuff like that. I call what I do on my boat, what you do on your boat, I call it marine glamping, because it is kind of like camping. Sure. It is a bit glamorous because you don't have to walk across the campground to go use the shower and the toilet. You've got your own on board, but it's not the same as what you're used to at home. It's not like push one button and it's done. You know, you do have to pump. You do have to think about what you're going to do with that later. There's all those things. When you take a shower, you know, is there enough hot water? You know what I mean? Yeah. You're in a marina, sure. If you've used the engine recently, sure. But if you've been at anchor for a couple of days, you may not have hot water anymore to take your shower. Sometimes doesn't matter because of the conditions. So that's why I call it marine glamping, because it is a little bit like camping, but I love it. You know, I wouldn't, you know, right now I'm in my apartment. I love my apartment. I love Palma, but it's the same place. Every time I come here, I'm in exactly the same place. Whereas on my boat, I can take it to Istanbul, I can take it to, you know, Mykonos or Santorini or Capri, you know, I can take it to all. So it's a floating apartment for me. That's why I love it. I can travel and have all my stuff with me and glamp a little bit. So it's not, you know, it's not like living in a tent. It's a little bit nicer than that. For me, that's perfect.
I imagine it must be nice just going back to like a traditionally basic lifestyle as well, like, because your job is like so stressful and you're surrounded by, you know, crazy things basically all the time. It must be nice just to go and chill out.
Yeah, your problems are multiplied 20 times because I've got 8 crew and up to whatever, 10, 12 guests. And so their problems are my problems, you know, and I don't mind it. I enjoy it. I love my job. I don't hate it. That's why I'm still doing it. I could have stopped doing it a couple of years ago, but I really enjoy it. Of course, sometimes it's stressful, but so many things in life that you love have that side that it's tough sometimes. Having a family can be a tough thing, but you love it. And so there's nothing else you'd want to do. And so it's the same kind of thing for me. But when I do have my free time, I do want to go and see these places. And, you know, I am considering, and I probably will end up with a land yacht in the next, you know, year or two, a nice RV that I can, you know, because I haven't been to Germany on a boat. I haven't been to a lot of places, a lot of Poland I haven't been to, and you can't really easily get to those places on a boat. So that's why I'll do RV, and I'm sure I'll enjoy it because I'm used to the small spaces, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, we joke about it, you know, when you're going into the RV park, you don't have to put fenders over the side. You don't have to worry at night if your anchor's dragging in an RV. You know what I mean? So I'm looking.
It's a little bit easier. The one thing I don't like about the RVing is at least when you're on a boat, you can just pump out what's in your toilet. Whereas if you're on an RV, you have to like take it out of the boat and transport it through your living room.
Yeah.
One downside to it.
I'm not sure how all that works, but I'll learn it once I get the RV.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. Composting is a bit strange for me. Right. Okay. A little quick overview on like your career, because that's super interesting. So obviously you're a sailor. You used to sailing on smaller boats, you know, like our size. How did you find yourself from a career perspective sailing like one of the biggest sailboats in the world, one of the fanciest sailboats in the world? Like, where did you start off, and how did you make those transitions to get where you are?
Okay, I had my 34-footer. I had her in Greece. I think I had her in Greece for about 8 years. And I used to go back and forth from the States and use her in the summer. And I had a cousin or somebody was working in the super yacht industry. And of course, cruising around the Med, I had seen super yachts. But remember, we're talking about 25 years ago. So it was a different game back then. There weren't as many. It wasn't easy to find out information about how the industry worked. It wasn't easy to figure out how can I get a job on a super yacht. That was really tough. But I thought about it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to work on a yacht. I wasn't sure if it would ruin sailing for me. Like it's one thing to be passionate about playing golf, but does that mean you definitely want to work in a golf course? Not necessarily. Yeah. You know, you might want to keep that separate. And I wasn't sure. But in 2000, I went cruising on my boat around Greece, kind of same area where I am now. And I thought, okay, I got all my ducks in a row. I'm going to go try this thing. So I put my boat away in Greece, flew back to North America, boarded my dad's camper van, drove down to Fort Lauderdale, and thought, okay, I'm going to have a go at this. My cousin or my brother-in-law's nephew, you know, was living there. He got me into a crew house, you know, told me about STCW. I don't think STCW was even a thing back then, but he gave me some pointers of how the industry worked from a working standpoint. And my first gig was working at the boat show, Fort Lauderdale Boat Show in October 2000. And went down there, got a job cleaning. I think they were Grand Banks, those trawlers. They had a whole bunch of them there at the show. And there's a group of, I don't know, 8 or 10 people. We'd all go there at like 4:30 in the morning, clean all the boats so they're ready for when the show opens at 9 or 10. And I got that. The guy who was organizing that, he took care of a few other boats. He got me cleaning I forget what it was, a Denison, 100-foot Denison or something like the typical American boat. And from there, I ended up getting a long-term day work job on Big Eagle, which is a well-known boat back then. And from there, I got another day work job on a Christensen, which was like a 38-meter motor yacht.
Nice.
And the captain wasn't ready to hire me as the full-time deckhand. But I started going to interviews. I would say, hey, listen, can I be off tomorrow afternoon? I've got an interview. So he saw me going to enough interviews that he finally said, okay, you have a full-time deckhand position. But I was 41 years old, my first deckhand position. Yeah.
No way.
I moved on to that boat, this Christensen 38 meter. It's a plastic, fiberglass motor yacht. And we did some more work on it, getting it ready in Bradford's. I think it's Bradford's in Miami, in Lauderdale. And then we crossed the Atlantic on it, which was an interesting situation. And I did a summer of charter, ended up in Monaco. I saw a few big Perinis in Monaco. I moved off. I left that boat and I was living in Antibes behind a foie gras shop. This guy had a little apartment and I was living in there for about a week. And then a Perini was looking for some day workers to help them stand the cap rail. So they hired 10 day workers. And they told us at the beginning, they said, out of 10 of you guys, 2 of you might have an opportunity for deckhand positions on board. And I ended up getting one of those spots with the Swedish guy, Sven. And I was in that program for about 5 years. I was with them. Then I took some time off, did some more courses, as you get your OOWs and your Master 500, Master 3000, blah, blah, blah. So I did some courses, took some time off. Then I ended up on Mirabella 5. A friend of mine had been working there. I got on there as the first mate for 2 years, and I was like relief captain. And then bought the 42 and took some time off to go cruising on the 34 back in the Bahamas. And I was up in Germany putting all my stuff from Mirabella 5 onto my new 42 footer. And I got a call saying, hey, I'm an engineer buddy was working on this boat. Captain had just quit. The new captain coming in had just quit, and they needed somebody like today. And I just had my Master 3000 license in my hand. So I drove down from Germany, never met the other captain, and took over the boat, helped them out for a little while, and then took some more time off, and then ended up going back into a rotation program on that one. And that's my career. And then 13, 14 years later, I'm still there. So that's pretty much in a nutshell my whole career. Yeah.
So you got into the industry like double the age of what some of the same people you are managing now doing that same job as a deckhand at 41.
Sven, the buddy, that we got the job together, he would have been 21, 22, something like that. And I was 41.
Oh, wow.
But I looked a little bit younger, so I probably looked in my 30s. And being that it's still weird. I'm not a big guy, so if I was if I was bigger and had the same presence as the captain, and I'm at a similar age to the captain, you would probably feel odd hiring me as a deckhand because I was a smaller guy. I looked a little bit younger, and I think the key thing that helped me was I had already had my own boat for like 8 years, so I knew I knew the destinations. I'd been to Monaco. I got hired in Monaco, but I'd been there. I'd been to Nice and Cannes and Saint-Tropez. I'd been to all those places. I knew what a bowline was. I knew what a clove hitch was. I knew what the difference between a sheet and a halyard. And this was a 53 meter Perini Navi that I ended up getting that job, the first sailing boat. But yeah, I did 9 months on my first motor yacht, and the rest has all been sailboats. So I haven't worked on a motor yacht since 2000, or 2000.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And just so on the current boat that you're on now, obviously it does like some charters and they film that and that type of stuff. But like, what is putting that aside? What is the rest of your job looking like? Like, do you do a lot of passages on that boat? Do you take it across the Atlantic to different places for different seasons?
Sure. I've done on Parisal, I think I've done 12 or 13 Atlantic crossings because we used to go to the Caribbean every winter.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I've done 22 or 23 Atlantic crossings total. One on the motor yacht. I used to do quite a few on that first Perini. I think I did 2 or 3 on Mirabella 5. Most boats of that size don't do single season. The owner's got a lot invested. They want to use the boat in the winter. Some of them will do charter. But most, the milk run, most boats, med summer, Caribbean winter. The adventurous ones go into the Pacific or up the East Coast for summer. Boats are doing the Northwest Passage now and stuff like that. People like to go further afield, but the hot spots are the Med, East Med, West Med, and the Caribbean. And so we would cross every winter on the various boats that I was on and do a Caribbean season. On Parsifal, we've done a lot of that, a lot of regattas, the Bucket, the Palma Super Yacht, Loro Piana in Virgin Gorda, and in Porto Cervo, Perini Navi Cup. I've done a few of those also. So, you know, we used to take part in a lot of regattas, but especially Parisal has been a busy charter yacht the whole time I've been on board.
Yeah. For the super yachts getting into charters, I mean, getting into regattas, is that like a way of showing off the boat to potential customers who would then want to come and charter it? Like, is there any of that going on, or is it just the owners just want to see how fast their boat can go? It seems like a crazy thing to regatta these expensive boats.
Like we always say, like anytime two sailboats are sailing in the same area, it's a race. You know what I mean?
It's a race.
Another boat, and she's nearby and similar size, you're racing her. Even if you haven't said anything, you're racing her. And so that's always in everybody with a boat, you want to race. So that's part of it for sure. But I think for the companies who build and sell sailboats, a lot of the big ones are involved in the bucket. They actually took the bucket over and they manage the bucket, because it is a perfect venue for them to showcase their boats. Obviously, they're trying to sell and get new owners into the sailing thing, or get owners to come up from a smaller sailboat up into a bigger sailboat. The bucket, for example, which is the biggest big sailboat event in the world. You know, I've been racing at the bucket years ago. It was bigger, but there were 47 boats. 47 boats,
no way.
all over 100 feet. The 100 foot is the cutoff. You need to be over 100. I think they've changed it a little bit now to bring in a few more boats, but yeah, 47 boats all over 100 foot, you know.
Right.
And it was a showcase for them. When we would race on Parisal, the company that built the boat would bring guests on board, and you know, we have a lot of fun. The family on Parisal is a really cool family. They have a lot of fun. They love the boat, they love the sailing, they love the racing, the excitement, and we have a good time when we race. And so we would have guests come on board that, you know, I know for a fact went on to buy their own boats, a similar boat, or we're in the process of building one already. And really, you know, it was a good opportunity for the company to say, hey, look, this is what you're going to get if you invest with us and buy yourself a nice boat. This is the kind of fun that you can have. And so, yeah, definitely an opportunity like that for bringing new families into the, you know, a big sailboat world. You know, or have step up or swap over from motor yachts. You know, a lot of boat owners will have motor yachts because there's more motor yachts, right? Super yachts, I think it's about 85 to 90% motor yachts, and then you have this little corner of the industry where they're big sailboats. And you know, a lot of people start off in motor yachts, but they'll look at those boats sailing on the horizon and go, wonder what that's like, you know? And so they'll try it for a while. Sometimes they'll convert completely. Sometimes they'll do it for one boat and then build their next motor yacht, stuff like that. But it's all kinds.
Right, I've got a good question, and we'll call this the final question. Okay. So you've done a bunch of Atlantic crossings in big boats.
Yes.
Crossing the Atlantic, going from east to west, is like a momentous occasion for anyone who owns a sailboat in the Med or a sailboat anywhere. It's a big deal. You're crossing a big ocean with the trade winds. How does planning that journey in a boat like Parisal differ from planning that journey in like a 40-foot boat?
Well, the big difference is on Parisal that we actually have the fuel range. We don't have to sail at all if we don't want to. We can go straight from Gibraltar. We always stop in Gibraltar. Almost every boat that goes in and out of the Med stops in Gibraltar because you can buy duty-free fuel in Gibraltar. It's not part of the, you know, even before Brexit, it wasn't part of the EU or whatever. So we can go direct from there on. I've done it on half a tank from Gibraltar to St. Martin. I was going a little bit slow. We left late. And I just wanted to see, so we were doing like 9 knots motor sailing. Mostly because of our schedule, because of our size, because of the conditions during the trade winds and the speed that we like to go. We don't normally sail all the way across. We cruise at 11 knots. If you've got 15 knots of breeze right up the trough, like right behind you, you're not going to be going 11 knots. In 5 knots.
Not in the size of that boat.
It's not going to happen. You know, you can do long jibes and whatever, like little boats do, or little boats are doing 6 knots and 15 knots. That's perfect. So we will because we have the range, we just come out of Jib and we beeline straight to St. Martin. We don't go down to the Canaries. And, you know, on Mirabelle 5, because of the amount of fuel she used, we would go to, I think, Gran Canaria and top up fuel there. But in Parsifal, we don't need to. We're single screw, which makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So we hold 45,000 liters, and I've crossed on 22. We usually cross on about 30,000 liters. So I can get to St. Martin and go straight into a charter without fueling. I still have 15,000 liters on board, you know? So
that's crazy.
Yeah. A couple of times we had one time we had a guest or a group of guests that wanted this, you know, deep water adventure, blue water adventure. And so we sailed the boat from St. Martin all the way back to Palma. And the purpose of that was to go sailing. So we didn't use the engine. I think we motor sailed for 2 days. We were out there for a month with them, and we stopped in Bermuda, Horta, Portimao in Portugal.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
And then ended up coming back to Palma. And that was just fun, and a month of sailing was amazing. Another time we had a problem with cutlass bearing. Did not want to risk scoring the shaft, because that's pulling the shaft and milling it is a big job. You know, we're talking $100,000 or whatever. So we said, hey, you know, we're a sailboat. Let's just sail. And we ended up sailing the whole way. Didn't use the engine. We turned on the engine and in idle speed went into Jib. Filled up. We had to fill up food also, because we, you know, when we came out Simpsons at Bay Bridge, and we could hear the squeaking. We investigated it, and we realized it's not worth the risk. So we went back in, got some more food. We picked up the anchor under sail, turned left just around Phillipsburg, you know, St. Bart's on the starboard side, and then just sailed back. And that was a lot of fun, but it took us a month, whereas normally takes us, I think, from Jib to St. Martin is like, I don't know, 13 days, 12 days, something like that. So it took us a month to get back to Palma, just sailing. And we did stop for fuel in Jib. We turned on the engine at idle, just went in, got the fuel, came out, and put the sails up and kept going to Palma.
Nice.
But mostly we motor sail or purely motor because of our schedule, and we just got to get there, you know. It's always push to stay on schedule on a boat, because, you know, you're doing something in the yard. It always takes a little bit longer, but that date when the guests are coming on board, that doesn't change. You have to get there, you know.
You have to be there for the money. Yeah. I
So
suppose as well, if you're thinking of,
what's that?
yeah, I suppose if you're thinking about an Atlantic crossing, those trade winds, the nice trade winds are like 15 knots. That would be great for a 40-footer, because you could probably do like close to hull speed all the way across. That is not even going to move possible.
But I mean, not at those angles, not right behind us, you know, because your parent 5 knots if you're trying to do 11. We often use the sails to stabilize the boat and get a little bit, you know, we can throttle back a bit. And sometimes we'd purely sail, but we're trying to stay on a schedule. Boats a bit smaller than us, like I guess the 40-meter boats, maybe up to 45, they don't have the range. They don't hold enough fuel. So they can fill up in the Canaries, but there's nowhere else to top up until you get to the Caribbean. So those boats have no choice but to sail, and they budget their time for it. You know, they leave earlier. Yeah. And they know they're going to get there, and they have enough fuel to motor part of the way if they're calms, you know, or if the trade winds aren't kicking in. You know, you have to go far enough south to get to the trade winds, right? You come out of Gran Canaria, for example, like the Arc, and you're still going south. I think it's 25 or something down there. They say when the butter melts is when you can turn right, when it is warm enough.
Right,
halfway between, I think you're halfway between the Canaries and the Cape Verdes, and that's usually where everyone turns right. Over. And then the trades have kicked in, and they're pretty reliable, and you can make your way across. Yeah.
So to take that boat across the Atlantic, that is costing $30,000 in fuel.
Well, it depends. I mean, when you're buying fuel in Jib, I don't know what the price in Jib right now with the war and everything else. You know, I know here I'm paying, I think, 150, 170 in Greece on my boat. I was paying 175, I think, a liter. But in Jib, duty free, VAT free, you know, I remember paying $50 a liter. You know, and that when the euro was strong, I think that crossing in fuel, when I burned 22,000, cost me 11 grand.
Oh wow! So yeah, you're getting
Yeah,
super
because
cheap.
the fuel, remember before a few years ago, the fuel was quite cheap per barrel. I don't remember.
Yeah.
It changes all the time. But now obviously it's more expensive, and it depends where you buy it. But that's why we all stop in Gib, because there's no duty, there's no VAT. There are a few places like that in the Med where you can buy, like Albania, Tunisia, Gibraltar. But obviously, if you've got a lot of fuel to burn, you might as well pick it up somewhere cheap, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so last question. What are your plans with your Jeanneau? What do you want to do with it this year?
The plan in the fall is to do some of Turkey, more of Greece. Next summer will be Montenegro, Croatia, maybe
Nice.
take it up into Venice. And then I'm thinking of heading west. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do it on that boat or if I'm going to buy a winter boat, but I want to do the Caribbean again at least once. I want to do the Bahamas again at least a few more times, Belize, East Coast, West Coast, Baja. And then I'll decide, that's like 10-year plan. I'll decide if I'm going to go out into the Pacific. That's it.
Right, okay.
I would like, but I think I'm going to end up maybe chartering a boat in Bora Bora or something before I get there, my own boat, because it's a long way off. But a lot of places, all the hot spots that people want to go to. And what about yourself?
Yeah.
You're planning a circumnavigation on the 54?
Yeah, so what we're thinking, we've got I think we've got 4 or 5 years that we're going to spend in the Mediterranean. That's for my wife, because she's from Syria, so we need to get her a European passport, otherwise she can't go anywhere.
Oh,
So
right.
yeah, we've got 5 years in the Med. I'd want to spend at least 3 of those years between Greece and Turkey, because I just love Greece and Turkey for cruising and just as countries. I think they're fantastic.
So much to see. So much to see.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So we're going to do that. This season, we're going to be in the Balearics. And I think after 5 years, we'll probably go over to the Caribbean, not spend that much time there, because I've done a lot of vacation in there and I think it's a bit samey. Bahamas looks really cool. I'd like to spend some time there and then probably go up the coast. I want to anchor outside the Statue of Liberty in New York. I've had this stupid obsession since I was like 12. I want to do that. So I'm going to do that. And then, head out into the Pacific, get to French Polynesia, and that's the destination, actually. I haven't made any plans.
I got a buddy who just arrived there on a cat. He's got a 45-foot cat, Colin from Parlay Revival. They just arrived recently. Yeah. But, I had my 34 in front of the Statue of Liberty, tied up.
Oh, you took it there?
Yeah. I did the whole East Coast. It was amazing. I did the intercoastal. It wasn't a delivery. It was the adventure of doing it. So I was in the intercoastal the whole way. When you get up north, you've got to come out. You go through Chesapeake and Delaware Bay, I guess, and you come out there, and then you're out. You have to go outside. There's no more canal until you get to New York, and then you can. It's not really canal, but you can get to Long Island Sound. But being in New York on your own boat was amazing. I ended up 2 weeks in New York. And there's a marina that I took a mooring. It was $30 a night for a mooring for my boat in New York City.
No way.
No way you're going to stay in New York 30 with that view, because
that was the best view in New York.
It's in the Hudson, so it's right next to Central Park. So I would take my tender, go into the marina, lock my tender to the marina, and then just walk into Central Park, walk down to Times Square. It was amazing. That's definitely
that's crazy.
Highlights of the East Coast for sure.
Yeah. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Right. Cool. All right, Glenn, cheers, mate, for coming on the podcast. That's been really good. And it's been nice to talk about some normal cruising stuff as well. That's been great.
Yep. Excellent.